And welcome back to the program. We now move to the public part of the program, where the last few weeks we've been accepting questions from the public for today's debate. We got a great response, and we'll try and get to as many questions as we can. The first question comes from John. Mr. Scarrow, you're on the record saying we need a new hospital in Prince Albert. How would you fund this? And to the other candidates, do you support a new hospital project? Mr. Scarrow, you're first.
Thank you. First of all, the need is, and I'm aware of the need because of my association with the Prince Albert Parkland Health Region. I attend their annual meetings, and once a year, Council meets with the Prince Albert Parkland Health Region to discuss common goals. For a number of years, in my first term and this term, I've been, as part of the economic strategy for Prince Albert, is talking about the Victoria Hospital and growing it as a regional centre, similar to Saskatoon and Regina. Saskatoon and Regina do not pay for their hospital. It's paid for as part of the provincial structure. There is fundraising for furnishings, but those two centres don't pay for their hospital. I'm thinking that we are very similar in nature in regards to the way we serve the North and work with the Northern Health regions, that's a kind of a natural way to do things.
Thank you, Mr. Scarrow. Mr. Dion?
Well, as you heard last night, I do support a hospital, and I do have a funding model idea. At this point, until the province tells us the rules change, is that we have to raise 20%. So I want to put together a group of people to travel to Ottawa, which will be led by the Parkland. It has to be led by the Health Authority because it's their responsibility. I'm going to ask them to join them. I'm going to ask them to bring on the Grand Council. And it was the Grand Council that actually I talked about the funding model. If you look at their treaties, it's the federal government that's responsible to pay for the health care. And today, outside the healthcare region, 25% of the patients come from the north. And I've asked the health region to look at a study to see what that total amount of people would be. And then my plan is to go to Ottawa and ask them for that percentage. Whether we have to raise 20% or 10% out of that $500 million, the government should still kick in and help the province and the health region with the count. If it's 40%, then we want 40% of that $500 million, not the taxpayers of Prince Albert.
Mr. Dion, thank you for your time. Mr. Link, you've got the final word on this question.
Well, we definitely have to see upgrades in our hospital, whether it be a new hospital or upgrading what we have presently, and this will all depend on finances. I would lobby the senior governments for money. Go to Ottawa if need be, go to Regina if need be, but it will all boil down to money, and we will have to make do with what we are given, and we can perhaps raise, and if we can only afford upgrades to the present operation, that's what we're going to have to live with. We have to be within our means, and we can't go into debt over this.
Thank you, Mr. Link. Question number 6 comes from Alana. In the city's master plan from years ago, it was a goal to make the city more cyclist and pedestrian friendly. Aside from the rotary trail, very little has happened. Do you think it should be a goal of the city? And if so, what specific steps would you take? Mr. Dion, you're first.
And that's a very good question. I want to thank you because actually we've discussed that at council, and like other cities, we're looking at bike lanes, because one thing that doesn't go well is cars and bikes. And even though our rotary trail services that need now, it's a concern of, as it gets busier, should we have bikes, rollerblades, and stuff on the trail, or should we have separate lanes? So I believe in energy efficiency, and I applaud those people that ride bikes home and to work. And so for that is we do have to look at that, and I do know it's in our plan. We have discussed it about in our new roadways putting bike lanes in as other cities, not only for the convenience of the bikers, but number one, their safety. Because cars and bikes, as people know, do not mix. And it's always the cyclist that loses in a collision. So I think it's prudent on us as we move forward in the growth of our city and in our new streets that we put bike lanes in.
Thank you, Mr. Dion. Mr. Link.
Well, in Europe, a lot more people ride bikes than we do here, and maybe it's because of the weather, but it's good to get out and exercise, and a lot more people, I think, would be riding bikes if we had something like bike lanes and the proper places for them to ride. Frankly, a lot of people don't want to be on the streets the way our traffic congestion is and the way our drivers drive. You're taking your life in your hands. I would be fully supportive of bike lanes, providing the streets are wide enough to accommodate them.
Thank you, Mr. Link. Mr. Scarrow.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes.
Please.
In the city's master plan from a few years ago, it was the goal to make the city more cyclist and pedestrian friendly. Aside from the rotary trail, very little has happened. Do you think it should be a goal of the city? And if so, what specific steps would you take?
Well, I was just going to back up a little bit because you're not including accessibility in that. And, we've really worked hard as a city to provide more wheelchair accessibility to sidewalks and a lot of sidewalk improvements. Rotary Trail is amazing. I was very fortunate to be among those who worked to have the trail built in Prince Albert. It's just awaiting now the West Hill Master Plan so that we can track it so that we'll reach the goal of surrounding the city. It has been probably the single greatest physical fitness program ever invented in the city of Prince Albert, and I congratulate those ahead of my years on council who put it together, and to the succeeding councils who are continuing to expand it. And I think that, as has been indicated, we are concerned about bicycle safety and providing more lanes for cyclists.
Thank you, Mr. Scarrow. Question number 7. This comes from James. What would you do as mayor to change the perception of downtown and bring business and people back to the core of the city? Mr. Link, you're first.
Well, I'm a big proponent of cameras. They've worked successfully in Europe and the States and other Canadian cities. And if nothing else, it's the perception so that people feel a lot safer going down there shopping. And I'm also in favor of a very much upgraded police presence. If people feel there's police nearby and that they can call to them, get them out of their cars, have them walking. We've done a bit of it, but certainly not enough. And if people feel good and people feel safe, they'll be shopping downtown.
Thank you, Mr. Link. Mr. Scarrow.
Thank you. We're really working hard in the downtown with the downtown bid. We're now a part of the Main Street program, which is funded by the province, some over $300,000 over the 3-year plan. We've had a number of events very successful in downtown Prince Albert that brought huge crowds. The Chamber of Commerce are fully on board with their Taste of Prince Albert, 2 special events in downtown Prince Albert, sidewalk sale days and 1912 revisited. Huge crowds on Saturday, and of course some really significant investment by business people in the downtown core, by people who truly believe in the success of downtown. It's part of always a central focus where we can work with the downtown, provide funding, and make sure that events are located in the downtown core, which really is the heart of the city. And that's where council needs to be, and frankly is.
Thank you, Mr. Scarrow. Mr. Dion, you've got the final word on this question.
Well, God, I get to actually add something to Mayor Scarrow's comment because he missed a very important point. I acknowledge to the bid. The bid is the answer for downtown. They're a community group of volunteers that work to bring suggestions and ideas and bring events. And everyone's right. If you want to revitalize your downtown, you bring events. But you also bring housing. Housing is also a key to downtown. And if I get elected mayor, I'm going to encourage housing. We have some buildings that are coming on stream that are going to be condos. I know there's soon going to be an announcement of another big apartment building being erected downtown, which excites me. But the other thing that we did as a council, we added bylaw officers. This summer was our most successful program and got our most positive responses because we added bylaw officers that were dedicated to the downtown. They increased the charges downtown over 200%. And got positive comments from tourists downtown, our residents and business. And that's the key. Keep working on the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Dion. Let's move to question 8. This one comes from Tanya. How will you improve roads and address the city's infrastructure deficits? Mr. Scarrow, you're first.
Well, the roads are being worked on as we speak, and there's been a lot accomplished, over $4 million in roads. We're making that investment. Infrastructure, roadways, are the same in Saskatoon and Regina as they are in Prince Albert. Our weather is very hard on our roads, and we make progress, and then severe weather, causes that to revert to its previous state. But we have put a infrastructure fund in place to fund, and in fact, the 2 intersections were funded specifically from that special infrastructure fund that we've created. And I think that we've made the case very strongly to the federal government and to the provincial government that infrastructure is a shared responsibility. of all levels of government, and we're prepared to do our part. The Premier announced $2.5 billion in infrastructure as an investment as part of his growth strategy. We're fully aboard, and we're making progress in our city on infrastructure projects.
Thank you, Mr. Scarroll. Mr. Dion.
Well, I think the key to attacking our deficit problem is put a plan in, a 4-year plan, because that's how long we're going to be, and then the public can judge if it's been successful. Put a short-term plan into effect and stick to that plan. And no matter what your needs are, every time we cut the paving budget, our deficit grows. Our biggest challenge, though, is not going to be paving in the upcoming years. It's going to be what I said last night. It's going to be what's under the paving. We have piping under our ground now that's over 100 years old. And we have to start working on it now so we don't have categorical failures like we did on 6th Avenue, where when the water pressure went down, the line collapsed. That's how bad it was. And I believe we're going to have this all over our city if we don't start addressing the underground problems. So the goal is, before the problem happens and costs you more money to fix, put a plan into place today that you can control your costs and control these failures from happening. And that's how you move infrastructure forward. And I have to thank the Premier for the $2.5 billion, even though we're a far cry.
Mr. Dion,
need more.
your time's up. Thank you. Mr. Link.
Well, short of Bill Gates giving us $100 million, we're going to be in a situation where we have to make do with what we have and what we can wheedle out of the senior governments. It's going to have to be planned, and I would only hope that when we plan something like underground replacement, that we can be doing the top of the street at the same time. So it's a coordinated project instead of doing one year and perhaps the other the next year. But we have to continue lobbying the senior governments, and they have been helpful to this point, but we're in the same shape as many, many other cities and jurisdictions in the country. We can only do as much as we have the money for.
Thank you, Mr. Link. Let's move to question number 9. This one comes from Craig. When you think of Prince Albert in 10 years, what do you envision for the city? Mr. Dion, you're first.
Well, that's a very good question, because I vision our city as a growth city. The Premier talked about the growth. He believes 60,000 people, and I believe that our growth over that period should be 10% of that, should be 6,000 people, and I believe by going out and getting it. I believe that we'll have a vibrant community. We'll have a community that we can be proud of, raise our families. We just have to work on it. And I believe 10 years is too long. I believe that a short-term plan should get into place so we can start that growth immediately and then have a new vision for 10 years, a long-term plan. But we're ready for a 10-year plan. We have housing allocated all on the West Hill around our soccer center, and we have plans to move our community forward. But the key is we have to move the community forward with the community. We have to engage the community. You can't do anything by yourself, and I believe by engaging the community that we will reach that goal of having a big, vibrant city.
Thank you, Mr. Dion. Mr. Link.
Prince Albert is a melting pot, so whether many of us care to admit it or not. We have people coming in from the north. We have a vast amount of immigrants coming here, and we have what we have now, and we're seeing long-term development by these immigrants and the native population. And I feel if we can all work together in employing and working together, we can increase business, we can increase our commercial opportunities, and along with that, bring families, other employees. And if we all work together, I'm sure we can get it done, and we can have a population of 60,000.
Mr. Scarroll.
My vision of 10 years from now, we would be a major health center. We'd be serving the north with all of our retail and professional services, but most importantly, health. I would see a large new First Nations University campus built in Prince Albert. I would see more offerings by SciAst with a new enlarged campus in skills and trades training. I would see more university course offerings so that you can take the full degree here in Prince Albert. I see a very respectful community, people who are here of many cultures and many colors, respecting each other and working together as they have in the past, well into the future, to provide the things that the community needs by their direct involvement as volunteers. I see more parks. I see the Little Red River Park being really expanded and become a true natural park. And it's a jewel that we haven't worked upon to bring into the potential that it has as a park.
Thank you, Mr. Scarrow. We're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, the candidates will take the floor and question each other. You're listening to the Mayor's Debates on 900 CKBI.